Yo, Zach Bradshaw, the Greensboro SEO Pro, back once again to ramble a little bit about SEO. So in this video, we're going to be talking about WordPress performance. As you can see from the title, we're going to be talking about some macro website performance factors that may affect you on any site. We're going to go over some of the page speed testing tools and website performance testing tools. We're going to talk about some factors that influence whether those plugins or whether various plugins or various optimizations that you may try to do to improve performance, why they may or may not work just based on some of the things that you're trying to do or how your site is built. So this was kind of spurred on by the host that I use for my money sites, WP Engine, improving or upgrading from PHP 5.6 and 7.0 to 7.2 that both got deprecated in December. If you're on a host like HostGator or GoDaddy or something like that, you probably will have not heard of this whatsoever, because they're not. This is a complicated fix that you really have to change your DNS for and stuff like that. But WP Engine makes it easy. Like, they make a lot of things easy, and that combined with WordPress updating to 5.0, both those things had me nervous. And so I wanted to do this on my own sites before I did it on my client sites. I also have a couple of clients that I'm developing sites for right now that are on WooCommerce, and I really need to get some of the speed optimization stuff down, because on e-commerce websites, your performance matters even more, and e-commerce websites tend to have sucky performance. So I did a bunch of different research on Divi specifically, the thing that I use, on various speed factors overall, and then WordPress specifically, and started the testing process on my own sites. I'll probably go through a couple of more iterations of this because, as you can see, none of these really did anything for me. So before we talk about that, I did want to point out the changes from moving from 5.6 to 7.2 and from 4.9 to 5.0. Now, I did this on my Greensboro SEO Pro dev environment first to make sure that my site did not break, and then I did it on my main site, and I've tested all those. I've tested them using a lot of different testing tools. So I'm going to filter this for you real quick, and then I'm going to go over these. There we go. ThankYouMonday.com. And now you can see that I looked at Google Pagespeed Insights, its mobile grades, then onto its desktop grades. Then I try to use webpagetest.webpagetest.org. I think that's what it's called. But they had a 503 error while I was trying to do this part of the testing. So for this, that's blank. But that is probably the testing, the website performance testing tool I trust the most, mostly because WP Engine trusts them and I trust WP Engine. But then we also use Pingdom, which is a very popular tool, and GT metrics. I took both DC and San Francisco ratings from Pingdom and got very interesting results from that. So let me go ahead and filter some of these down. I tested a variety of pages on my site that are all different. So my homepage is it's a newly updated page that is fairly well optimized, but it has a lot of multimedia on it. Then I have a free SEO audit page that's a little bit smaller than that one, but has gravity forms on it, which has some extra scripts and things like that. So I want to test that one separately. Then I have a case study that's pretty long, dynamic page with multiple YouTube embeds, some photos, and is even going to get added to. Then I have a very clean, easy to load, like a well-performing post called Manifesto on my website that it really just has 2 photos on it and is mostly just text. Then I have some older pages on my site, both what was my original homepage now moved to my Greensboro page, and my North Carolina page, which are both terrible. And then a older case study that is really poorly optimized. These are better optimized pages than this one, but these are more dynamic. This one is just a blog post like Manifesto that should perform well, but performs terribly because I did not care to basically optimize my images and do things that I need to do for that post, because it has a ton of photos and they're all just way larger than they need to be is one of the main things. So let me go ahead and filter some of these down to just look at the homepage real quick, and we can see an improvement from really on both these sites I can look at, but from the 5.6 to 4.9, you can see that the speed didn't really increase, but we knocked 0.2 off of the seconds here. These are different, all different metrics here. So this is your first content paint, and I'll get into these in a moment here. But this is your first content paint, what they call your speed index, your first time to interactive, and then your first meaningful paint. So we'll talk about those again in a second. And then I did the same thing for desktop, and you can see across these that move into 5.2. Sometimes here you see like an extra 2 seconds. Here you see about the same. Here you see half a second cut off. Here you see a 6-point increase in the points, and then a 1.5 seconds shaved off, 0.3 shaved off. And as we continue to scroll over here, the scores got even better. Pingdom really liked the move in DC, but it didn't do as well in San Francisco. And you see stark differences there. And then GT Metrics ended up with essentially the same scores, and this loading times to me seems about the same or non-existent. Now, if we come down here to the dev environment that has some, this is live, so it has different factors that are going to affect it. You can see sort of the same trend all over the place on this main site, but better scores for certain things. So here it went to a 35 for the mobile, up 13 points with a much faster speed index, a much faster interactive time, again a 20-point decrease in the time it takes for the meaningful paint. Lots of times when you're doing speed tests, like this seems like a glitch to me. It seems like this one should have jumped up to a 92 or something like that based on some of the other things that I've done here, but you can see that it, on the desktop it was actually slower, on the mobile it was actually faster. So this is one of those things that this video could have been named "Why Your Page Speed Tests Are Useless," and that's part of why I'm doing all of these at the same time. So you can see here that the move up apparently slowed this one down, didn't really have much of an effect in San Francisco, and then didn't really have much of an effect for GT Metrics. But as I get into less optimized pages on my site, well, let's do a better optimized page on my site first, and just look at Manifesto. So you see that the mobile page speed for both of these increased to 2, and some of the differences between these. So this has a CDN Cloudflare. This one, my live site uses Cloudflare. My dev environment doesn't use any type of CDN at all. But you can see, where am I here? So you can see, I'm sorry for getting lost there. But you can see that these scores are pretty much always going to be higher than these scores. But on Manifesto, as we jump up from the unoptimized or the older version to the 7.2, you see this one seems slower, but then much faster, about the same. And then we jump up to 100 here on the desktop, a much faster desktop index. And this kind of looks like a glitchy result here as you're looking at that. And as you come over, we got a much faster DC grade, and a way fast, under a second, San Francisco grade. And then GT Metrics kind of shows the same thing, where the score may have gone down a little bit, but it increased. And some of the same fluctuations. This one drops 2 seconds on the dev environment, but it doesn't have much of an effect in San Francisco. And then some of these other numbers do the same thing. So as I get rid of these, and let's just say that I don't filter anything, and if I just wanted to come in here and look and see on average across all of these different pages, moving up here, this one is on the dev environment. So moving up, increased our score by about 2 points on average, lowered our first mobile content paint, or made it slower, but kind of a negligible amount with only this many tests, the way that hosting and websites work. But looks like clear reductions in both the speed index and the first time to interactive, much better on average desktop overall score, and then some better ratings for desktop pretty much all the way across. Now, if we scroll over here to these other tests, you see we're looking at about 1.5 seconds on average cutoff for Pingdom and DC, and about the same ratings. There's probably within some standard deviation or something like that here for San Francisco. San Francisco, as you can notice across all these, performs much better than DC, which tells me that the server of WP engines that this is hosted on is closer to the West Coast. Now, you can also look at things like, all right, if I'm looking at all these, this looks like an anomaly, and if I were to do this test again, I bet we're closer to 1 second than to 3 seconds here, and that alone would now push this down. But again, it looks like we cut off about 0.4 here on the total load time, and marginally increased one of the scores from GT metrics. So there's a variety of pages that we can look at. Some of my worst performing pages you see here, 24 seconds time to mobile interactive, but up here we're looking at 2.4. That was reflected by 25.3 here. So there's a lot of fluctuation here. That some of it is due to how the internet is run, but some of it is just that page speed and performance tests are only going to be reliable to a certain degree, and part of the reason that I like page speed tests, or part of the reason that WP Engine probably likes them, is because they automatically start you out with 3 tests in a row together, and their results seem to be much more consistent. If I continue to do Pingdom tests over and over again, or GT metrics tests over again, well, especially Pingdom over and over again, I will get wildly fluctuating results. And then in Pagespeed Insights, I can test this back to back to back, and these will slightly fluctuate as well. Even the score here, which doesn't seem like it should fluctuate as much. Certainly these times should, but I wouldn't expect the opportunities and the diagnostics to change much, which I think is reflected in the score. So now let's look at some of these Pagespeed Insight scores and see what they're actually telling us. So you can see here, just on my homepage, there's a stark difference between mobile and desktop. You can see that reflected across all these. This one, for instance, it gets my best, I was about to say great, but my best mobile score here, and a excellent desktop score, and again 22 and an 85, and then a 21 and an 83. Across these different things, Google is looking at slightly different things, but largely the same thing. So because my site isn't that big, hasn't been around that long, we don't have access to the field data, which is way more valuable in Pagespeed Insights than this lab data. But this lab data, if you're using it as benchmarks and recording this, makes it more valuable because now I can come do the tests again. Just looking at these, they're not going to help you that much, because again, I would do this test again, and this would say 1.5, this would be at 3.4, this would be at 2.9, and this would be at 1.6, and I'd be like, what? So the opportunities, the past audits, these are much more valuable to you in order to find out what you can improve on the site. So you'll see, I just want to show you some commonalities between these. I've eliminate render blocking resources, defer unused CSS, and Google gives me better recommendations about the different things that I can do. Some of the things that are actually causing the times, how long these things take to load. Lots of them are loading all at the same time, and that means you basically need to attack the longest ones first, but not in all cases. You really need to analyze your waterfall chart, which we'll get to here in a little bit, in order to really identify what you need to do first to really cut down your or really increase your scores and cut down your load time. So when we switch over to mobile, they change slightly because things are a little bit different on mobile, but you still see defer unused CSS, eliminate render blocking resources, and now it's telling me to basically lazy load my images. Deferring off-screen images mean don't load them until they're in the view window, meaning any images that are below what I'm looking at, you won't see them, and that can help a page like the top part load more quickly. In this case, for this page, some of my other pages I don't want lazy loading on this page because I feel that it will cause issues with some of the animations I'm doing on the page. I don't want these things to not be loaded and then need to do an animation too and really mess up. So there's a degree of, you can't test everything when it comes to website testing, where the devices, the traffic, the daily traffic, all these different things, and that's, you see in this, at first I recorded times within these so I could know when they were, so that could be causing some of the fluctuation between these different things here. So as we go across the different pages, let me look at all the mobiles again, just so I can compare these. Some of these have different things that come up. So again, we see eliminate, render, basically the same three that we saw there. And if I eliminate these, Google might come up with another couple. But you see this one is not, 150 milliseconds. It's not that, there may not be one under that one, but it basically shows, well, I guess this one is showing a top 4. This one's added another one because I'm using large images on this one. It's like, dude, show these in a better format. Or maybe it's because I'm using PNG on here. So then we come to this page, which is one of the worst on my site. Again, that best, you can go look at how terrible that site is. It's very often telling me 24 seconds from that and from other tests. So defer off-screen images because they're so huge. This one, if I wait to load these enormous images, is going to save me 11 seconds on this website, on this page being responsive on a mobile phone. Serving better images could shave another 7 seconds off of it, and then just better images some more. I'm not even sure what that means. Efficiently encode images, probably saying I didn't remove any of the EXIF data or anything like that. And then you see these two that are still here. So there's a lot of what will affect what's actually gonna cause your pages to perform better is how that page is developed. So when you go, again, look at my manifesto page, these things, again, it's only these that are getting in the way. And if those weren't there, if you shaved off 1.5, let's just say, if you shaved off 3 seconds from this, the render, not all these scores will be affected by that, but certainly the time to interactive. Let me see. Yep, the first meaningful paint. First contentful paint. I'm not sure what speed index measures, but both of these would go up. I'm not sure that this one would drop down to 1.3, but it very well may, because this is basically render blocking resources they have to be loaded before the page starts to load. And lots of times there's a scripts, there's a CSS style sheets. But if there's things that have to load before the page loads, then your user's sitting on a white screen until that script is loaded. And if that script is loaded from the bottom of the page or something, that's pointless. So you want to put them in the footer or defer some of these things. You can defer both CSS and JavaScript as well. And when it's saying eliminate render blocking resources here, it's basically saying just defer your JavaScript or get rid of it in some of these cases. So see, this is a whole jQuery JavaScript database, and sometimes you can't defer your jQuery. It may break your site. That's costing me 1.3 seconds basically. And again, Divi style sheet and the dash icons, these things are loading in concert in all likelihood, and that's why it's not costing me all of this time in aggregate. But if I eliminate this one, then it's going to cut me off 0.3. Reduce this one, it's going to cut me down to another 1.50. And eventually the longest thing that I have loading here is below 1,000 milliseconds, and that becomes, goodness gracious, and that becomes a much faster site. Holy cow. Let me get out of these and start talking about these waterfall charts. One of the things I like about usemonday.com to record these different speed tests is that I can record the URLs for them, and it will pull these speed tests back up. And that's true for both Pingdom, GT metrics, I guess I should not say both, but all three. Also webpagetest.org, which started to work once I got to my later testing. So let me change the filtering here, and we can look at some of these plugins, how they actually affected things. Well, let's go over this waterfall chart first. Well, no, let's talk about how some of these plugins affected things. And as you will see, it's very little to none. So there's this great article on the Elegant Themes blog. It's from 2015 by Brenda Barron. I'm not sure who she is. I didn't look her up, but it goes over just a bunch of different things. And it's basically the goal of this post is to get your Divi, using Divi, get 100 in the desktop score. Now, that is not really how you should look at website performance. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but it is a goal that maybe you should have, because this is, again, Google, how they're analyzing your site. If you don't pass the rules, you have a worse chance of, or if you don't, I guess I was just reading that, but if you don't do the things that they're looking for, then you're less likely to show up for them, especially if you're a startup or a new site. That's not like, hey, this website performs badly, but people don't care. If you have some big site like, probably not Forbes.com, but a large site that people are used to it loading poorly or doing some other things, having some different scripts or whatever, then you may be able to get away with it. But if you're a new brand and Google just straight out of the box, he's like, dang, homie, your site takes forever to load, they're going to be less likely to start testing you on the first page in the first place, and even giving you a chance to wow your users. And I mean, your bounce rate is just going to be higher if your performance is worse. So they go through a variety of different plugins, and as I try to do some of these things, I found some of the same things as them, and I came to the conclusion that this post is really not that valuable if you really want to optimize your Divi performance. Now, getting to 100 on Pagespeed Insights is largely dependent on what is on that page. Now, across different tests, I landed 100 on the Pagespeed Insights desktop test on my manifesto post, because it's a smaller post. Let's see where we have it, because it doesn't have a lot of extra stuff going on. You can see it was at 100 as soon as I upgraded to 7.2. Then I proceeded to add the score booster, which is pretty much the first thing that they recommend in that post, and that proceeded to lose 3 points. Then I added WP Auto Optimize, which they also suggested in there. I'm not sure what settings they use, but I tested a bunch of different settings on this one until I found the one that I thought was doing the best, and then I recorded the results based on that, and it bumped it back up to a 99. But then I added also the speed booster, did another couple of things, and it bumped it back up to 100. But again, I was already at 100 without these other speed boosting tests. And if we look at how these actual speeds or loading speeds were affected by these different plugins, you'll see that it's not much at all. So again, this is my first test, and it was earlier than these were later in the night, and there was definitely like a 2-hour gap. So there, again, you may need to adjust for some of those factors. So let me actually change the order of these. One moment. Sorry about that. So again, these are stacked on top of each other. So this is Score Booster, this is Score Booster plus Auto Optimize, and this is Score Booster plus Auto Optimize plus Speed Booster. And they do kind of some overlapping things. I also ran tests with a async specific plugin by the same people that make Auto Optimize. But based on the Divi theme, most of these had no effect. So let's just look at that. You see, we boosted our scores a little bit here. Again, this is a score booster plugin, was the first thing that it did. We got a little bit better scores here, and then we added this other one, and the mobile score fell again. If we scroll over here looking at these scores, we started from a 90, dropped down to 89, went up to a 93 with these two together on average. Again, this is still not back to 100 yet. And then now we dropped down overall, but this one went up to, you see how much these fluctuate. Very similar results across all of these. One of the things that is super obvious though, and there could be, very specifically, this one, I could have even recorded this one wrong. Maybe this one was 24.2, and that would affect some of this. But you can see, if this was changed, let's just do that right now. If this was changed, this is a 15.5, a 15.5, a 15.5, and a 15.5. With not much change between these. We're also looking at about 3 seconds on these, and the results are the same. Really across everything, that there was not much improvement as we went through these different plugins. So on the Pingdom tests, I noticed that they, aside from Pingdom, I guess I should add that to my last statement. Aside from Pingdom, and I think I trust Pingdom more than all the other speed tests. It's like the most popular speed test. Eventually, I'll probably subscribe for their like monitoring service, but I really don't trust it that much. That's why I haven't subscribed to their monitoring service that much. But you see, Pingdom Tests showed much faster results basically from any of these plugins, and this one looks like it, lots of times I just think that these are anomalous scores that don't really translate to anything tangible that I can use to make decisions based off. You see I got below 3 seconds in GT metrics from a like a 3 point. Oh, thought it was a 3.3. There's not much change across all these, and I could do more testing to see if any of these may have a negligible small effect. But let me show you the reason that they're not going to have any effect. So this is Manifesto, and let me just go ahead and click through also on this one as well. The things what affects how your WordPress site loads more than anything is how your page is built. And then your server. Now, you probably can't control much on your server except to pay for a host that is like decent, and then make sure that you implement some caching, some CDNs. But other than that, you just need to build small, lightweight pages. This is a waterfall chart, and it probably looks intimidating, but each of these is a file that your browser, your Chrome browser, your Firefox or whatever, has to load, and it's sent from your server, which is basically a specialized computer that is holding all of your website files. And there's a variety of different types of files that they have to load. Some of them are JavaScript files. Some of them are CSS files. You know what? Some of them are JavaScript. Some of them are CSS. Some of them are, I'm not even sure what a wolf is. It's something to do with Google fonts here. And then some of them are images. So we have some PNGs down here. And again, this is my Manifesto post. It's a super small post. It performs better than all of my other posts consistently in terms of performance. And part of the reason is because there's only 52 requests on this list. So now let's look at one of my worst performing pages. And it has 75 requests. You know what? Let's pull up one more of these that I know has more requests. Let's check this one. It has 75 requests, but as you scroll down here, you'll see that it has some images, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 10 images that are all taking 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 6 seconds to load. And that's, again, because they're massive images. And this is you can look at what these mean. This is like basically when your browser starts to build the site on your actual computer, like when you can start to see it, or not when you can start to see it, when it starts to get built. Then this first paint is like when something is first visible in the viewing window. And then this is when, I'm not sure what a DOM is, but it's basically like when you can start to do stuff on the site. And then this is when like everything is done loading, and pretty much when your Google Chrome browser stops spinning on here. So you can see clearly that these photos, even though they're all loading at the same time, are the thing that is pushing this bar out. So the first thing that I could do that would cut down time, and it would cut off about 300 milliseconds, is that I could make these two images smaller. If I make these two images as small as they should be, they'll probably load in like a second and a half or less. Then this blue line would move back to this one, right? So now this image that is basically 300 milliseconds faster loading than these two would be the next longest thing preventing my thing. This would go down, and now we have a JavaScript file that is causing issues here, and it may be, yeah, so I need to potentially disable my emojis here, and I think there's probably more to it than that. That may be, I'm not even sure what that file is, but I'm sure I could get this one gone, because there shouldn't be any JavaScript file taking 6 seconds to load on my site. But as this one was gone, this blue line bumps up, and you see that you have to cascade and get all of these down to really, even if you just move this bar to here, you've optimized 9 of your images and you've saved 4 seconds off of this specific test. every user that goes to your site is going to experience some different things. And that's why Pagespeed Insights is not really, it's more of a developer's tool. And, let me just touch on this post from WP Rocket. That is probably, I'm not sure. They're probably the best cache plugin. I really want to test them out, but because I use WP Engine, I cannot add any caches on my own. They do the caching, and I'm grateful for them to do that. I don't have to worry about cache plugins at all, and that's why you didn't see any cache plugins here. That's why you don't see me testing Cloudflare here, because I really wanted to. I already have a cache, already have Cloudflare. Certainly, I could test different CDNs, different cache technology, and a different host in order to optimize for some speed things. But I know that I need to rebuild some of my pages, and that maybe some of these plugins and other features can help me get through some of these things that I know are slowing down my page speed, like deferring CSS and things like that. So Google used to use a bunch of different tests. They still kind of do have a bunch of different tests for page speed, but they've essentially gone to a lighthouse thing. I'm sorry, this article had to reload. So no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong article. So the main thing with PageSpeed Insights that makes where its value really is not in the lab data. What I ended up recording in this, the more valuable data is the field data, and that, as you can see from this report from Forbes.com, shows basically 30% of loads for this page are in under a second, and that's 30% of the people going to this page load it in under a second. That could be because they're using a nice phone or a fast computer. 52 are between 1 second and 2.5 seconds, and 18% are above that. Because my website basically isn't popular enough, I don't have any field data showing for my site, and I'm actually going to look into things to get Google to have field data sooner, but it could just be a matter of traffic. But you can see, as you come in here to their actual lab data, you're still looking at these crazy time to interactive first meaningful paint, but very few people, over 82% of people are experiencing under 2.5 seconds for load times. So that maybe this is first contentful paint. This is first input delay. I'm not sure what that is. It could be related to first CPU idle. I'm not seconds. No, that's 50 milliseconds, so that must be some very small server-based process. But you see that for them, their only real opportunities is to lazy load their images, to make sure that their images don't load until the person could see them anyway. So that's basically where PageSpeed Insights best data is for now. This stuff is more for developers, and all this stuff is useful. But as you scroll down through this article, one of the things that I found super interesting is that when they're doing these mobile page speed tests that are telling you 24 seconds, they're using a phone I've never heard of, a Moto 4G on a throttled 3G connection. So it's very unlikely that any of your users, even on very poorly built pages like some of the ones that I have, are actually experiencing 25-second loading times. Now, that could happen, but I've never, I mobile test these pages. I've mobile tested them to make sure that they're not breaking. Recently, I haven't, again, updated this performance stuff, but I know that those pages don't take 25 seconds to load on my phone, or either of my phones that I use for testing, and they certainly don't take that long to load on my website. Obviously, the website scores weren't saying anything about 25 seconds, but it's important that when you're using PageSpeed Insights that you know what you're actually looking at, know what it's actually for, and that's why I think these waterfall charts are actually much more helpful in finding out, holy crap, this is taking up 6 seconds of time here, and there's you can see that you don't see any single thing that is that long for this one. It looks like if I just eliminated Google Fonts from this, I'm gonna cut off another half second from this already really fast loading page. So you can see how the number of requests, the actual things that are on this page, and what they are is affecting the length of this time a lot more. So here's an article that I'm going to link below in this video, and probably in a subsequent article that I create for really optimizing Divi as I go through more of this process and do some things with WooCommerce. This is the best post that I've found on optimizing WordPress speed, and it's not necessarily going to work for your Divi install based on some of the things that you're doing. So just to give you an example of some of the things that get in the way for me that I'm not going to be able to, oh, you know what, it's easier to pull up from Pagespeed Insights. Let me do that real quick. And while that loads, let me actually go over what I was going over here. But you see 38 different things here. And these are, some of these are explaining. He's basically saying don't use crappy hosting that's owned by this massive conglomerate of hosts that just buys up hosts that get popular and then turns them into crap. And this is him saying SiteGround is the best. I want to test them. Use PHP 7 or above. Use a caching plugin. Again, with WPE, I cannot use a caching plugin. I want to test the combo of SiteGround and WP Rocket because I've heard great things about it, not just from this specific article here, but lots of articles that I looked up on PageSpeed. And I want to see how that actually stacks up and probably create a post between that because I also want to test out Liquid Web and maybe even DigitalOcean. So clean up your database, having a strong CDN, and he is obviously recommending Cloudflare as your CDN here, and maybe he's suggesting a secondary CDN. Using multiple CDNs is certainly a possibility that is not necessarily going to show up in your page speed scores, but may affect some of your users because if your website is sitting on a server or a specialized computer that holds websites in New York and the user that is trying to access your site is in China, it's going to take a longer time for that to travel. The files on the internet don't actually travel like through the cloud or like on the airwaves like people think they do. They actually travel through like massive wires that actually run across the bottom of the ocean, and that it takes time for those electrical signals to pass through, and that's one of the main things that you need to understand what's going on in your hosting if you really want to maximize your speed, and that's WordPress, websites overall. Lazy loading images, again, this may not be something that you want to do for specific pages. I know I don't want to do it. Serving scaled images and putting optimized images on your pages is like one of the main things. Again, you saw 6 seconds that was costing me on a page that those photos are 1, too large and 2 are not optimized, as in they haven't been losslessly compressed. You can look at this article to find out more about that. Disabling features that you're not using, and that's why I brought up this PageSpeed Insights here. There's various features. So this is telling me to eliminate these or defer them. Some of them I just need to get rid of them. So I'm not using Divi's timeline module. This is a plugin that I have right here. I'm not using this timeline module on this page, so it shouldn't be costing me any time. The Divi style sheet, I need to find another way because again, you need to attack the longest things first, but in most cases, again, you kind of need to understand your waterfall chart to understand which things are loading together or which things are actually the things that are holding you up at specific points along the path. One of the things that Divi does automatically is what's called asynchronized loading of scripts, and it's a really important thing that basically if it didn't do this, you would see that in each of these, this one would load, then the next one would start right here, and 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 it would waterfall. It would have to wait for every single one before it to be done before the next one started. And you can see this one will load several things all at once, and it takes, as this one gets done, a new one starts or whatever. But some of these, it allows the processes to overlap and to basically just load faster. Let me not ramble all the way down that rabbit hole. But some of these things like dash icons, I don't need this to load on every page. This is like taking way too long. There's some crazy things going on with why my Google fonts are loading here and then here again and then here again, and you see that's a lot of time between those, and I guess they're all the same time. Maybe they're all loading the same. My jQuery, various things that I can look in here and see. This specifically right here, I'm going to get rid of Gutenberg because I don't use the block library, and this is again costing me more time and doesn't need to load at all. So again, here coming down to things that it's like defer the CSS, like no, I don't need this block library, which is something to do with the new Gutenberg. I don't need dash icons all the time. And some of these other things I just need to look into. There's a variety, just a ton of things that you can do to speed up your WordPress site, and it really depends on how you're building it. So look into the site. Again, I'll link it below. And then just finally, let me just touch on some things that in my loose ends board here that I really, for my own brands, I take handwritten notes, but I use a loose ends board to display to my clients some of the things that are, on the bucket list for them overall. So I just thought I'd create this real quick. So these are a variety of things that I need to want to do or look into. So I need to test a plugin organizer, and that is a WordPress plugin that basically makes it so I can choose which pages load which plugins, and that will allow me to eliminate like that Divi timeline module from loading on pages it doesn't need to load on. Then test Google libraries. There's a variety of scripts that you can allow Google to load for you, and that's one of the things that you can do is find as many. Your web page is going to load faster with a YouTube video as opposed to it loading a video that you've uploaded to your server and then having to load that. When you offload basically website loading or any resource to Google or to Amazon Web Services or whatever you're using, those things can help your page load faster. So I need to problem solve on Google Fonts. I need to do a deep dive onto AMP and actually start to create AMP pages for my site. Accelerated mobile pages, that's a whole different thing, and that's why Google Pagespeed Insights mobile tests are so significantly lower than your main pages. It's because you pretty much need to have AMP in order to get those, those top scores for that. So when you're creating layouts in Divi and you use their pre-made templates, you end up with a lot of double code, especially like every single module saves that code, but you should really save that font within the customizer. And so there's a lot of different things where, okay, I've added the font into my customizer, but I didn't eliminate it from all the modules because I wasn't using the Divi library properly. So there's things within that. Lighter YouTube embeds, which is something that I want to look up. Sometimes my YouTube embeds are what is holding, adding an extra 0.5 half a second to my loading times, and I need to, go ahead and fix that. And there's a variety of ways to do that. I'm also going to problem solve or do research on YouTube versus Vimeo. Let me actually make this larger for you so I can see what's going on here. Then we also have, I want to split test Cloudflare versus WP Engine CDN, because WP Engine has a CDN. I might even test like Mac CDN and some other CDNs. Thank you for finally loading there. So then some next gen image formats. I need to really understand what's going on there. I know there's some new JPEG and some all types of files that I don't actually use on my site yet that maybe I should. I need to problem solve the dash icons because I use them in my theme. Divi uses them. But I don't want those things loading on all the pages that they don't need to be loading on. Same with the Gutenberg features. I've seen mentions of locally hosting. I think it was actually on this website here. Host Google Analytics locally. I want to find out what that is. And then WP Engine also can geo-optimize content. So I can serve West Coast content from the West Coast. I can serve East Coast content from the East Coast, or not really East Coast content or West Coast content. I can serve content based on where the users are. If they're in New York, I can serve it from closer to them. And I need to look into that option and see what they're really offering there, how that's different from their CDNs or Cloudflare CDNs, and what's really going on there. Because for me, my San Francisco scores were much better than my DC scores. I'm on the East Coast. So if I could just get them to move me to a different data center, that may be something that could boost my scores overall and my general performance, especially once that lab data starts coming in, but actually making a difference for my users that are over here. So I didn't expect to ramble so long, but I think I did a really good job this time. It took me a couple of cuts to start to get in the groove of how this video needed to go, but I've made a heck of an overview on why your WordPress plugins aren't working, especially if you're on a theme like Divi, where these plugins do not have the permission to actually synchronistically load these things, or do a variety of the things that, like, yeah, I can check the box in that plugin, but then I can come on here and I can see very specifically in Google Pagespeed Insights or on my waterfall chart that, like, no, the page did not wait for that to load, or the page had to wait for that to load. It did not actually defer it. And part of that is because of how your website is built. If you're using something from Studio Press, or if you're using Thesis or another WordPress framework, or maybe even just the blocks editor now that Gutenberg's out, then you may have much better success with those type of plugins. But if you're using Divi or Elementor or something like that, then I expect, or using additional plugins for functionality, like just for instance my timeline module, if you're using some slider element or something like that, not all of those are going to be able to, not all of those are going to comply with your speed plugins, especially something that is, like Score Booster. They're clearly trying to give you a better Google page speed score. That might not necessarily mean that's going to lead to a better user experience, which is what Google is really testing. They're giving you suggestions based on the page speed score, and you need to think about those things and satisfying those things, but you need to make sure that in the end, it's your users that are satisfied with the performance of your website. And sometimes those two things can conflict. So I'll go ahead and wrap it up here. If you're interested in more SEO and any digital marketing ramblings, you can go ahead and like and subscribe or whatever. I think I'm supposed to say that stuff because I'm a YouTuber now, I guess. But there will certainly be more WordPress optimization, some ones that are specific to, a little bit more specific to Divi, as I go through, like, this is how I changed this page to load better, and ones for WooCommerce, and some other things as well, because there's lots of small problem solving, but this one should set a baseline. And obviously, if you have any questions, leave them below, and I will be happy to answer them. So thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.